Hello, everybody on the webinar. Welcome. Let's get started. I'm Dan. I'm a VP of new products here at Reforge. I've been here for 6 years. I've done a little bit of everything at the company, and I've been leading the Reforge Extension work most recently. What are we going to be doing today? First off, this isn't a sales demo webinar thing. This is all about how we built the extension, what we're planning to do, and the technical details and tools of how we're doing it. So I hope this is really informative and that there are elements of this that you can take back to building your own products, whatever they may be. I'll do a quick demo at the beginning just to set the stage of how it works today to get a sense of how it progressed and also some of the limitations that we thought about. And at the end, we're going to make sure and save some time for Q&A. Okay, the first thing I want to show is just a quick demo, just so everyone understands how it works. Okay, I'm here in Notion. And actually, sorry, let me take a step back. The Reforge extension works in all the tools you use for work: Google Docs, Notion, Confluence, Coda, and more to come. And so in this example, I'm here in Notion and I want help writing a PRD. And so I'll click on the Reforge logo in the bottom right of the screen, and a side panel pops up. So if I want to create a draft of a PRD, I'm going to come in here. I'm going to say my prompt here that I've already written, but basically what I want to do is I want to create a service that automatically scours all podcasts, listens for reviews that people give of places they've been, and aggregates it so it's a new source of travel reviews. This is the service I want to build. So I'm going to write a sentence or two, and I'm going to ask the extension to write the PRD. So it goes to work immediately, and it's going to write this PRD, going through all the things that Reforge teaches you should think about as part of our 4D road mapping process. Things like product strategy, the value prop, differentiation, the vision, customer focus, and also how you do business impact. So we have our draft. It's really easy. I can just copy it, and then come over here. I'm just going to paste it in my document, and boom, I have a great start to my PRD. One of the other features I love, if I go back, I can see how other people have done it. And so if I do this right afterwards, I see a PRD template from company Mutiny. I see a artifact about a travel hub product strategy from TripAdvisor. So this is actually really relevant. Probably want to look at this. And see another PRD template from Reforge. So the goal here is showcase how other people have done similar work so that I can be inspired and level up my work as well. So that's another great feature that I love. And then the third one I just want to showcase is we give you the option to get suggestions on how you can improve your document. So if I click this, what it's going to do is it's going to take the contents of my document. I don't have to copy and paste it. And it's going to give me suggestions from the experts and the knowledge hosted on Reforge. And so here's a bunch of stuff from Sachin about specific user personas, like maybe different income levels or people with different demographics, include competitive insights, and also specify key features. So these are the types of suggestions you're going to get that are customized to the document that you're working on, as well as sourcing material from Reforge documents. Okay, so that's a quick demo of how it works today. Now I want to go back to how we started on this, the process we used, and the tools ultimately we used to build this. So this all started, we launched Reforge Artifacts last year. Launched on Product Hunt, did great, but we still heard the same feedback that we had heard for a long time, which was, you have great courses, you have great content, and now artifacts, but I'm having trouble applying it to my work. And so we took a step back and we said, how do we actually address this core customer problem? This is something that I've heard in the 6 years I've been here, and we've launched many features, added lots of different courses, and it wasn't something that we were really able to address. And so I became really excited about building a Chrome extension for all the reasons listed here. But it's faster to develop. You can actually put things into the tools that people use. There's a vision for this being fully done locally on people's computers in the future as models get better. But there's many reasons why we're interested in doing an extension. I'm not going to go into all of them. So one of the things that we first did is we explored building a Chrome extension that would look at your new tab page. It's kind of hard to see here, but what it's doing is it's looking through my browser history, and it's just showing the domain of the websites that I've been to in the past 7 or 28 days. And the idea here is let's just understand what tools people are using so we can create better suggestions on how they could use those tools in conjunction with Reforge material. And the other thing here, I just logged documents, the titles of documents. So this was our first exploration, and it felt like it was pulling this. It felt like there was something there, even though this obviously wasn't a real product. And it was just me and Archie, a designer on the team. The next thing we did is we started using the side panel API in Chrome. And what we did is we took the contents of a document in Notion and we did similarity search and we just linked to artifacts. This is similar to the demo I showed before. This felt even more compelling. We got good feedback. After this, we started to think about, okay, how do we make it more valuable? What should we do here? And so I built a retool dashboard that allowed you to put in content from documents. It would look up artifacts. And then what I was doing is I was asking an LLM to generate the structure of the user's document as well as the structure from the artifact, all with the goal of comparing the structure of the documents to see if the outputs from the LLM were able to help me think about ways in which I could restructure my document to make it better, to make it more concise. And the goal here was let's prototype really quickly and let's focus on the output, not necessarily how it looks. And this is something we could give to multiple people and they could play around with. Again, that it felt like it was moving in the right direction, but it was really handy to be able to have it be in the browser. And so one of the things we did is we hacked something another team here at Reforge had done where they had built the in-app chat on reforge.com. And we, using iframes, we basically just iframed it in. And you can see here in this demo video, what I was doing was I basically took my prompts to the LLM and I put it in the message, right? Let's see, right here, you see it right there. You can see it for a hot second. And the goal was, let's simulate what it would be like if we had our own chat interface, if we weren't just piggybacking off of what another team had built. And this felt even more compelling. We got lots of good feedback from users, and this felt like the direction we wanted to keep going down. And I think this was one of the moments that we thought, oh, this wouldn't just be an accessory to artifacts. This is something that it feels like could be a general purpose tool to help you do better work. So we get even more excited about solving the core customer problem of helping people as they're doing their work, not just helping them find artifacts on reforge.com. One of the things I just want to stress here is up until this point, it was just me and a designer on the team. We didn't have a software engineer. And I have a background in computer science, but I think that with the advent of all these coding tools, I forget who said it in the chat, it's a lot easier for people who are not software engineers to build prototypes. And we were able to get very far before we added a real software engineer to the team. But once we did, it really supercharged our team, so we were able to build real software. And if you were one of our beta testers in December, you would have noticed a big difference starting on when Eddie joined in January. And so we really have been working on this since January. And so what did we start doing? We started doing real software development. We forked the other team's front-end components. We forked their back-end. We allowed logging in. We integrated with Google Docs, which was a big milestone for us. We started doing personalization based on your identity on Reforge. We also built some onboarding into the extension. So we just had a lot more room to experiment. Okay, so that's just a quick timeline of what we went through, how we thought about the customer problem, and now I want to talk through very specifically how it works. So this is a diagram that shows the basic RAG that we were doing when we first started. When the user clicks help me improve my document, what we do is we retrieve the contents of their document with JavaScript, and then we make a request to the Reforge backend with the contents of their document and the type of help that they want. And what we do is we run embeddings on the user document and their prompt, and we then do similarity search with that embedding to find relevant Reforge material across artifacts, guides, and lessons. Once we have the relevant documents, then we go and get all the metadata associated with it, and we send in that relevant Reforge material along with the system prompt to the LLM to say, please give us suggestions leveraging this Reforge material. And then we're just going to stream the responses to the user's extension. And this was great, but to be honest, it was pretty stupid and didn't produce the outputs reliably that we wanted. And so we released a smarter version a couple months ago, and this is how we adjusted it. And the main difference is we are classifying their document. And so the types of suggestions we want to give are very different from a job description or a PRD. And this is some of the feedback we got from beta testers was, you're telling me to improve my job description with things that are good for a PRD, but aren't good for a job description. And the LLM wasn't good at detecting the type of document and then tailoring its advice to that type of document. And so we decided to explicitly build in a step that would classify it. And then in addition to that, say, we could send the LLM down a certain path. What would an expert suggest for this type of document? Or how would an expert evaluate this kind of a document? And what we do is we generate 3 different suggestions. And then for each of those suggestions, then we run embeddings on that suggestion as well as their content. And then we filter the content for that type of suggestion, for that type of document. So if it's a document talking about marketing technology, we want to source material from our marketing programs, and we want suggestions to be the types of things that you'd expect for marketing technology. And so we really did a lot of work to figure out the type of document as well as map the types of documents and the types of suggestions to that type of document, as well as the content that would speak to that. And so one of the big upgrades that we did to our system was this exact process. And so then we basically, in parallel, asked the LLM to produce a suggestion given that more specific Reforge content and given those specific questions, create suggestions, and then we collect all of them, and then we stream all 3 of them back to the extension. So I know there's already a question here. Our stack right now, we're using OpenAI. For embeddings, we're using OpenAI's embedding service. We're using Pinecone to store those embeddings. For prompt storage right now, we're using LaunchDarkly. We're switching to a tool called Adeline that I'll show later. And then also we're using a segment for analytics, which sends to our data warehouse. We use BI tools to look at our data warehouse. And then for testing, we're starting to use Adeline. I'll go into how we're doing that. I just want to show a couple of ways in which we've done optimization. So one of the big things we decided in the very beginning was not to store any user or company data. So what does that mean? We don't store the contents of your documents. We don't store the text of the suggestions that we send back to you, and we don't store the messages that you send to us. All those things from the beginning we decided we would use only in service of sending to an LLM, and then the responses we wouldn't store as well. There's no concerns about how our data storage, anything like that, because we're not storing any of it. And the agreements we have with the LLM providers say that they don't store data submitted through the API, and they don't train any models. So we can't train any models because we don't have your data, and our LLM provider doesn't store or train any models using customer data. That was a conscious decision in the beginning because companies are very concerned about their privacy, but there is some data that we've been storing that's not anyways revealing any of a company's information. And so I want to walk through the examples of how we optimize some of that stuff. So one of the things that we looked at was the distribution of the course recommendations. And so what we're storing that we recommended growth series to you, or that we recommended the retention engagement program, but we don't store any of the details of why. And so one of the things we're looking at here is we are showing the distribution of which courses that we show. And if you were an early beta tester, you'd have said, well, you recommend scaling and product delivery. That's these green bars a lot. And when we switched from the simple RAG to the more complicated RAG, you can see here that that happened at this point, right here where my cursor is. And you start to see, we started sourcing material from Mastering Product Management and Product Management Foundations much more, because the types of documents people are sending to us are heavily grounded in things like PRDs. And frankly, those 2 programs are much more applicable for that type of document compared to something like scaling product delivery. So this was an example of, we saw an immediate change in the information that in the courses that we were recommending to people and the lessons, because there was a bug. We weren't, this is it was so challenging it wasn't that hard to figure out, but it was challenging to see, was we weren't storing all of the Reforge program content in our Pinecone vector database. And so we were asking for references across the entire ecosystem, but it's really hard to know for a fact that we'd accidentally excluded some information from being stored in our Pinecone vector database. So when we asked for references to material, it wasn't searching the full Reforge corpus. And so once we fix that, you see the distribution totally change. It looks very different. We're sourcing from many more programs. Another one is the number of Reforge references per response. A lot of people want to see, that's part of the way we differentiate versus other tools. And so one of the things is we count how many references to Reforge material we send back in our suggestions. I wish we started sending this data before we made that big improvement that I talked about, because I think you would have seen the vast majority of responses would have gotten 0 references. But once we started to do this, you can see the percentage of responses that had 0 references was less than 50%. And one of the interesting things when we switched to 4.0 is we started getting way more references. which I think is a good thing. Maybe we can do work to make it so that you don't get 11. That seems extreme. But it's been really interesting to see how when we change things like a model, or if we experiment with changing different providers, having a sense of are the important metrics that add value to the product, like referencing Reforge material, is that fundamentally changing at scale for our users? Okay. All right. So what's next? What are the things we're taking away from some of this stuff? One of the big feedback points that we get from users is this: it's not as intuitive as they'd like it to be. It's in a forgettable zone. They have to remember to click on the Reforge button in the bottom right, and it can be hard to build new habits. And so one of the things that we're doing is we're thinking about, and this is part of the value of having it in a Chrome extension versus a native integration with tools, is that this is a mock-up from Figma, but kind of like how Grammarly works in that it underlines words when they're misspelled. We're thinking about how we can, in a not obnoxious way, let you know that we have suggestions for how you can improve a portion of your document. So the idea here would be that you could click on this and it would open up the suggestion, and the suggestion would be grounded in a particular location within your doc, and you could choose to take action on it or mark it as completed or whatever you'd like. Another thing we've been experimenting with is additional tools that we support. And so this is actually a proof of concept I have running on my machine. What we're doing is we are directly adding suggestions into the UI within Jira. And the idea here is we look at the information on the page and we help you remember things that I think most people know, but everyone forgets. I don't know if anyone else is like me and they're really lazy and they don't put descriptions into their Jira tasks. It's really helpful to be reminded. You should, if it's a bug, there's a whole bunch of things you should do for bugs. If it's a story or a task, it's really helpful to give a ton of context to the people who are going to be working on this because they don't have the same context as you. And then also ground that in Reforge material. So this is part of the road that we want to go down. And there are a bunch of implications for this from a cost perspective, as well as our model choice that we've been thinking about a bunch. So this is another thing that we're thinking about that's on the roadmap. And then also we need to just make it smarter. And I want to do a quick demo of a tool that we recently started using that I think will help us a lot as we try and make it smarter. Okay, so there's a tool called Add-A-Line. And what it does is instead of storing our prompts in LaunchDarkly, which feels like it's not the long-term solution, Add-A-Line is a place you can store your prompts, you can send in logs, and you can experiment and evaluate the success of what is generated by the LLM. And so here I have my prompts that we use, and there's a little playground environment. So I can, just like any of the other systems, I can run the prompt along with some user information. The nice thing about it is I can also have some logs. And so you can see here, we're not sending in any user data. We're just doing it for the people on the team. But this gives us much better visibility and insight into what's actually being sent to the LLM as well as the response. And so for this, just as an example, one of the things that is driving us nuts with the current product is there's sometimes these trailing periods because we include the references and then the LLM writes a period after the reference. And we are expanding these references to be this nice UI component. And there's a period at the end. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to change the prompt so it includes all the references at the end, not at the end of the sentence. And so like you can see here, here's all the stuff. Here are all the variables from the call to the LLM. So here's the user question. We pass in some personalization information. Here's the document I sent in, all this stuff. And you can also see what it spits out as the completion. And so it's nice to be able to go in and see what my teammate Archie did or my teammate Eddie did. Again, we're not logging any customer information here. But when a team member is testing it, finds something weird, we can go in and see exactly what happened. And the nice thing about it is we can develop these evaluations. And so right here, we wrote a regular expression that just makes sure that after every reference, like we have a reference ID that we ask for, there's a new line, that there's not a period. And so the idea here is we can change the prompt really easily and understand whether or not on an ongoing basis, the output is putting the references in at the end. And so I'm really excited about this as a tool because we could have lots of different ways in which we evaluate the prompts. You can have code that does this. You can also have an LLM. So we could say one of the evaluations might be make sure that it's personalized. We reference the person's title and their company and why their company would care about the suggestion. That's something we could easily define in a new evaluation by having an LLM evaluate the response back. So this is a tool I think we're going to be using heavily going forward as we focus on improving the quality of the outputs from the LLMs. With that, I want to open it up to any questions. I just see one of the latest chats. So one of the nice things that I'm not tied to any one particular model. One of the nice things as a part of these things is they make it really easy to, so you can create a data set of inputs and you can see what the outputs look like. And so we could easily say, let's test it against 4.4.0 from OpenAI, and then let's test it against 1.5 Gemini Pro and the best model from Anthropic. And so it makes it really easy to test the outputs across all the models. It's just a little drop down right here. I'm not tied to any one model. I just want the thing that's going to produce the best output while also not becoming insanely expensive. And those are things we're thinking about as we think about there's a free experience for the extension that isn't as good as the paid member experience. And there are ways in which we think, okay, how do we still deliver a great experience for a free user, but also not burn a lot of cash on free users, make sure that we provide the best experience for our paid members, but also not exceed the revenue that any individual user gives us. Okay, so question about how it works. Because it's a Chrome extension, the extension can access the contents of this document. I could write in whatever I wanted here, and when I click Help me improve this document, what the extension does is it pulls the contents of whatever is in the document and it sends that to an LLM. And so it's not just it goes two ways. We actually don't automatically write stuff into the document. That's a little harder, but that's the idea, is that we can automatically update things for you in your document. Like that's how I think Jira would work. We click a button and it would just update the description automatically for you. And it can read information from the document. And that's the beauty of the Chrome extension. The Chrome extension allows you to, the same way that these password managers work or Grammarly works, it can access the information of what's in your browser. We don't do anything in the background. We only do it when you're interacting when you have a tab open, when you're doing something, but it allows us to build what otherwise would be an impossible integration and interact directly with the pages. So, that's how we built a Notion, a Google Docs, Coda, and a Confluence integration. And we have integrations for Miro, Jira in the works, and aspirations to build integrations for lots of other tools. I think it's really important, especially for someone who's building AI products, to understand what the key variables are in building a product like this. There's things like the latency of just overall response, as well as the time to first token. I think that's a huge variable that you need to keep in your mind at all times. There's the cost. Something like 3.5 turbo is incredibly cheap, but the quality isn't as good. And 4 turbo is much more expensive. 4.0 is a little bit less expensive, but it still can be expensive. And then also the quality. And I think depending on what type of product you're building, even 3.5 could be potentially expensive depending on what you're doing at the scale you're operating. And I think it's important for a PM working on an AI tool like this to really have a deep understanding of those three variables, how they manifest in a product that you'll be building, and how it ultimately integrates with whatever the technology is that you're doing. So luckily, I had a lot of experience building Chrome extensions before this. And I come from a technical background. And so I think it's been easy for me to come up to speed on these things. But I could see it being challenging for a PM who doesn't have any of the technical underpinnings to understand the key inputs, as well as how you bring this technology into the various tools or launch new products with it. The first experiment we did a year ago, where I built it in a Jupyter notebook. And I queried our data warehouse that had elements of our content, wrote that to a vector database, and then did embeddings in a Jupyter notebook. So it's like one of the classic examples. If you go and look for any tutorial on how to do RAG, it's in a Jupyter notebook. You run embeddings on a question, query it in a vector database, and then you send the snippet that came back from the vector database to an LLM with a prompt. And oftentimes totally hallucinated a whole bunch of stuff. You really need to dial it in so it addresses the content that's specifically in the context that you're sending. So I think the simple RAG is just go find Like an example of simple RAG is your company has documentation. You have your documentation stored in some form. When someone asks a question like, do you offer monthly or annual plans? You go to your company documentation, it finds that relevant section that contains information about that. And then you send that snippet of text to the LLM with the user question. And you tell the LLM to ground the answer in the context that it's sent from your documentation. So that's what I think of as simple RAG. I think more sophisticated RAG is that next iteration that we did, which is, I'm probably going to butcher all these terms, but we're doing a little bit of chain of thought where we say, what kind of document is it? Then we tailor the questions to that type of document. And then we go and we do very focused RAG based on a limited set of content as well as the output from one of the earlier steps from an LLM. One of the things I hope to do long term is have a graph of knowledge, a graph of experts, a graph of knowledge, and focus in on the right level of the graph. Because the type of PRD that you need to write if you work in fintech versus B2B versus consumer social at a big company versus a little company is going to be different. And so one of our goals is to make the LLM really smart by giving it the right context. And so I think that's the kind of thing I think about when we need to move beyond simple RAG of just, here's the best text, the most similar text we found related to this question, to let's really customize the context in a sophisticated way to produce the best outcome. So we're not doing any fine-tuning of models yet. Fine-tuning is a process where you take outputs from an earlier interaction with an LLM and you say, this is really good. And I want you to increasingly produce outputs that look like this. So we haven't done anything like that yet. The thing that we're doing is that we are limiting the suggestions to material on Reforge. And so with ChatGPT, you're going to get the next most likely token. And with the Reforge extension, we are telling it to rewrite the suggestion grounded in Reforge material. And so you should be able to trust the output from the Reforge extension more frequently than you can trust the output from something like ChatGPT, because we're focused on a particular vertical and we're also pulling the knowledge from vetted leaders and vetted experts from name brand companies that you trust and know. We still have a long ways to go, but I think already there's a big difference between asking ChatGPT for a PRD template versus the one that's in the Reforge extension. And hopefully it's a lot more convenient as well, because it's directly integrated in the tools you're to use. You don't have to copy and paste. You don't have to go to another tab. It's right there for lots of different tasks you need to do while you're working. Okay, so the tooling, I have a bunch of artifacts on this on Reforge that go into it. So I think the first question was, how do we produce charts like these? The tool that produces this is a tool called Metabase, and it's an open source BI tool that we use here at Reforge. This is hooked up to data that's in our data warehouse. We use Snowflake as our data warehouse. And it's very easy. You don't even need to know any SQL to create charts like this. You just say group by day, group by the program, and tell me the distribution of the recommendations per day, by week, by month. It's a great tool. I'm a big fan. I've spoken on their webinars. But if you use Tableau, Looker, you should be able to do similar tools as long as your company has a BI tool like this. How do we get the data in our data warehouse in a form to do this? We use Segment as our CDP. So the extension, again, doesn't send any customer data. The extension or our backend sends data that is non-sensitive to Segment, and then Segment writes that to our data warehouse. And for example, when you ask for a PRD to be written for you, we say to Segment, user 123 asked us to write a PRD. And then in this example, if someone gets a reference to Reforge material, we say user 123 got a reference to growth series. And that's then Segment then writes that to our data warehouse for all the users across all the things that they've done. And then our BI tool allows us to visualize the results in a really easy to use way. So that's Metabase. And then Segment also allows us to send some of these events into a tool like Amplitude. So this chart was generated, you can see here, generated by Amplitude. And they have great charts. I'm also a big fan of Amplitude. There are other tools that do similar things like Mixpanel, all the goal of really helping you get some data into what the usage of your product looks like. How do we think about cost? The great thing about starting from scratch is that you really don't have to care about costs. It'd be a different story if you're a big established company. If you're Facebook and you need to think about integrating this type of feature into your billions of users, it's going to be meaningful from a cost perspective from day one. Even if you limit it to 1% of your user base, that's still a large number. And so I think I've enjoyed the fact that starting from scratch, you don't have to worry about cost too much. And I think one of the things that I've always thought is if it is expensive, as long as we can produce the outcome that we want, which is this is worthy of staying in someone's browser and it's not too cost prohibitive, we'll be able to afford it in our highest tier membership. And so one of the things I did with our finance team in the very beginning was I said, I'm going to look at our existing user base. I'm going to model out if this thing were to grow to certain thresholds of users, given what the average usage looks like, what does that cost look like? And so what is the average cost? Okay, let's say a user opens their extension 10 times a week and it costs a penny to do that. It'll cost 10 cents per active user per week. And then given user projections, what does that look like for both free and paid? And I think that I have a different dashboard that has costs by the process within the flow. So there might be costs by doing the classification. There might be costs for generating the suggestions from an expert, and there may be costs for actually writing it out to the extension. And understanding we might be using the latest and greatest model that's more expensive. And just I think having a good sense of where the costs are and where you need the best output and where you could potentially go from 4.0 to 3.5 turbo, that there's an order of magnitude difference in price, and there may not be an order of magnitude difference in the quality of the outputs. And so having a sense of the cost per user, projections of that has really helped me say it basically is not that expensive right now. It could be meaningful, but because it's such a core problem for Reforge of how do we, people love Reforge, they love our content, but not everyone wants to take 3 courses a year. And so if we can solve the problem of people take maybe a course a year, if we go from that to they use Reforge on a daily or weekly basis, the cost feels insignificant. If we can earn the right to be in someone's browser in their tools on a weekly basis, because that will have great impacts for the business in terms of customer renewals and retention, and our ability to offer them additional services that we just can't offer today because we're not in that flow. I'm not thinking about a native desktop app at this time. There's just 3 of us on this team right now, me, a designer, and 1 engineer. And so we are extremely constrained across. Luckily, we're getting some great help from Chris in the past and also Ben on marketing. But in terms of actually making any changes, we're really constrained on resources right now. And so the Chrome extension felt like the right place to start. And I feel like it validated that was correct. I think building desktop apps is just going to be fundamentally harder. There's just a lot more. I think it's a lot easier to interact with what you're working in a web browser if you have a Chrome extension. If you're a native app, I think you're probably just going to be able to see what's on the screen. I think it's probably harder to do things like scroll up and down and get all the contents from a document. I'm excited because one of the things that Chrome said is shipping in a future version is a LLM local to the browser. And that would allow us to do the inference locally in your browser, so we wouldn't have to send any of your information to the cloud. I don't think the quality of the responses is going to be good enough yet, but it's only a matter of time before more of the stuff can be done on device. And so I think it's a nice pathway for people who are more security conscious. And so I'm sorry, I don't think we're going to be able to support the Notion native app anytime soon. I would love to, but I just don't think that's on the roadmap given the size of the team today. I don't think we're doing anything fancy. I would love to do something more sophisticated. I think we're probably using 500 token. We're splitting on every 500 tokens, I believe. That's my latest memory of that. That might be wrong, might not be right. But we could do so much more on the strategies for chunking the elements of the Reforge material. And I don't think we're doing anything fancy on re-ranking either. I forget the name of the service we're using to do re-ranking, but this is a part of our push for improved outputs. Is I think we can do a lot more to make it smarter, and so we're really going to sink our teeth into it this month. And to be honest, we really haven't done that much. So I'm really excited to see how we can level up the quality of the responses going forward. Thank you, everyone.